She was just the black cleaning lady, quietly scrubbing the marble floors of a billionaire's mansion, until the CEO's wife saw her holding the baby, and publicly humiliated her, shouting for everyone to hear. But what no one knew was that this housekeeper was actually the secret owner, the billionaire mother of the child herself, working undercover. And when the truth finally came out, jaws dropped. The wife was fired on the spot, and the housekeeper's quiet heroism changed everything. Before we find out what happens next, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you think class or color shouldn't decide someone's worth, smash that like button now. The grand hall of the Sterling Crest mansion was a monument to wealth, a cavern of shimmering marble and silent, echoing space. Sunlight streamed through cathedral-sized windows, painting long, golden rectangles on the polished floor. It was a place where footsteps were hushed, and voices were meant to be kept low, a temple of quiet opulence. Camille Brooks, dressed in a simple grey housekeeper's uniform, was on her hands and knees, methodically scrubbing the vast expanse of white stone. Her movements were steady and focused, each circular motion of her cloth a small act of devotion to a home she knew better than anyone. Beside her, a little to the left, was a sleek, state-of-the-art baby stroller. Inside, baby Olivia was beginning to stir, her tiny chest hitching with a small, almost inaudible cough. Camille's focus shifted instantly. The floor could wait. She watched the stroller, her body tense. The cough came again, this time more insistent, a dry, tight sound that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Olivia's face, usually a picture of serene innocence, was beginning to turn a faint shade of pink. Another cough, sharper this time, a desperate little gasp for air. Camille didn't hesitate. Her years of quiet observation, of learning every nuance of this child's life, kicked in. She dropped her rag into the bucket of soapy water, rose to her feet with a fluid grace that belied her simple uniform, and reached into the stroller. Her hands were gentle, practiced, as she unbuckled the safety harness. "It's okay, sweet pea," she murmured, her voice a low, calming hum. "Auntie Camille is here." She lifted Olivia into her arms, cradling the small, struggling body against her shoulder. The baby's back was rigid, her tiny fists clenched. Another cough, a rattling, wheezing sound, tore from her little lungs. Camille knew this sound. She knew what it meant. Holding Olivia firmly, she began to pat her back with a specific rhythmic pressure, a technique she had practiced in her mind 100 times for just this moment. It was then that Victoria Hale stormed into the hall. Vicky, as she insisted everyone call her, was the young, beautiful wife of Richard Hale, the mansion's live-in CEO. She moved not with grace, but with a sharp, aggressive energy, her designer heels clicking like angry punctuation marks on the marble. Her eyes, cold and sharp, immediately locked onto the scene. She saw her baby, not in the pristine, expensive stroller, but in the arms of the help. Her perfectly sculpted face, usually a mask of bored indifference, twisted into a snarl of pure outrage. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was not a question, it was a weapon, loud and sharp, slicing through the sacred quiet of the hall. It boomed, echoing off the high ceilings, a sonic boom of entitlement. Every member of the staff within earshot froze. A footman polishing a silver vase stopped mid-swipe. A junior maid dusting a portrait of some long-dead patriarch froze with her feather duster in the air. They were like statues in a museum of shock. All eyes darted from Vicky's furious face to the calm, focused housekeeper holding the coughing child. Vicky marched forward, her steps fast and furious. She stopped just inches from Camille, close enough for Camille to smell the cloying sweetness of her expensive perfume. "I said, what are you doing?" she repeated, her voice dripping with venom. "Put her down, now." Camille didn't look at Vicky. Her attention was solely on the baby in her arms. Olivia's coughing was beginning to subside slightly under the steady patting. "She couldn't breathe," Camille said, her voice quiet but firm, a stone of fact against Vicky's wave of fury. Vicky let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a nasty, ugly sound. "She couldn't breathe, and you decided to what? Play doctor? You are the cleaning lady. You scrub floors. You don't touch my daughter." The words were deliberate, each one designed to inflict maximum humiliation. She gestured wildly around the hall, making sure the other staff members were watching the show. "Do you see what she's done?" she shouted to the frozen audience. This maid thinks she can just pick up a child like she belongs to her. She turned back to Camille, her eyes narrowing into slits. You are just a black maid. Do you understand me? You exist in this house to be invisible. You don't touch things that aren't dirty. The racial sting in her words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Camille's jaw tightened, but her hands on the baby remained steady and gentle. Olivia let out a final shuddering cough and then took a deep, clear breath. The color was returning to her cheeks. She was okay. Only then did Camille's shoulders relax a fraction. Vicky, however, was just getting started. Her face was flushed, a blotchy red of fury. You are fired. Do you hear me? Fired. Get your things and get out of my house. I will not have your filthy hands on my child. With a sudden vicious movement, she shoved Camille to the side. The shove was clumsy but forceful, meant to demean. Camille stumbled but kept her balance, her grip on Olivia never faltering. Vicky then snatched the baby away, her movements rough and jerky. Olivia, startled by the sudden aggression and the loss of Camille's comforting presence, immediately began to cry, her wails now full-throated and healthy. But Vicky wasn't done. The sight of the mop bucket seemed to inflame her further. With a grunt of pure spite, she kicked it. The heavy plastic bucket tipped over, sending a wave of grey, dirty water sloshing across the pristine white marble, soaking the hem of Camille's uniform pants and pooling around her worn shoes. The staff gasped. This was no longer just a verbal reprimand, it was a physical act of contempt. Vicky stood there, breathing heavily, clutching the screaming baby to her chest like a trophy she had just won. She looked down her nose at Camille, who was now standing in a puddle of filth. Clean that up, she sneered, and then get out. Camille looked at the spilled water, then at the crying baby in Vicky's arms, and finally her eyes met Vicky's. For a split second, the calm facade of the housekeeper dissolved, and Vicky saw something in those dark eyes that made her recoil. It wasn't fear or shame, it was something cold, hard, and ancient. Something powerful. Before Vicky could process it, the moment passed. Camille's expression became neutral again. Just as Vicky opened her mouth to scream another insult, the sound of heavy, frantic footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. Richard Hale, the CEO, was running toward them, his face a mask of sheer terror. He wasn't jogging, he was sprinting, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the marble. He ignored his wife, his eyes locked on the baby. "What have you done?" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "What have you done? She saved our daughter's life." Richard Hale didn't wait for an answer. He lunged forward and snatched baby Olivia from Vicky's arms, his movements frantic with a terror that his wife couldn't comprehend. He held the baby close, his hand splayed across her back, his ear pressed to her chest. Listen, he could feel the steady, reassuring rhythm of her breathing. A wave of relief so profound it made his knees weak washed over him. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury, and they landed on Vicky. "She has a condition," he gasped, his voice raspy. "The doctors told us, a rare congenital airway condition. She can have sudden laryngospasms. Her airway can close up without warning." He gestured wildly with his free hand toward Camille, who stood silently in the puddle of dirty water, a pillar of stillness in the chaos. She knew what to do. She recognized the signs of silent choking. She was performing the exact emergency procedure the specialist taught us. She acted faster than any of us could have. The words hit Vicky like a physical blow. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, sick-looking pallor. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the lowly housekeeper with the life-saving hero her husband was describing. The grand marble hall, just moments before the stage for her triumphant display of power, now felt like a courtroom where she was the one on trial. The silent, watching staff were no longer just an audience. They were a jury. Their stunned expressions were now tinged with something else: judgment. For a fleeting moment, every single person in that hall, from the junior maid to the head butler, saw Camille Brooks in a new light. They didn't see a maid. They saw a savior. They saw a woman who, while being screamed at and humiliated, had remained focused on one thing and one thing only: the well-being of a helpless child. But Vicky Hale's ego was a fortress, and it would not fall so easily. Embarrassment quickly curdled into a new, more defensive kind of rage. Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. She had no right, she snapped, her voice high and shrill. She took a step toward Richard, trying to reassert her authority. I don't care what condition Olivia has. That woman is a stranger. She is staff. Her job is to clean, not to play nurse. Her hands should not have been on our child. End of story. Richard stared at his wife, his face a battleground of conflicting emotions. He was a man torn. On one side was his clear, overwhelming gratitude for the woman who had just saved his daughter. On the other was his loyalty to the beautiful, volatile woman he had married, the woman who was now digging her heels in, refusing to concede an inch of ground. The pressure of his position, of maintaining a perfect-looking life in this glass house, weighed on him. He held back, his jaw clenched, his silence a victory for Vicky. Camille watched this silent battle play out. She saw the conflict in Richard's eyes, and the unyielding arrogance in Vicky's. With the baby now safe and breathing steadily in her father's arms, Camille's purpose in the spotlight was over. She bent down and gently picked up the rag from the floor, wringing it out with methodical slowness. She then began to mop up the dirty water from the pristine marble, her movements deliberate and graceful. The act was so humble, so utterly at odds with the heroism she had just displayed, that it stunned everyone into a fresh silence. Here was the woman who had just saved the life of the heir to this immense fortune, and she was on her hands and knees, cleaning up a mess made out of spite. She bowed her head, her dark hair hiding her expression. To the rest of the staff, it looked like an act of submission, a quiet acceptance of her place. Vicky smirked, a small, triumphant curl of her lips. She had won. The housekeeper was back where she belonged, but as Camille wiped the last of the grey water from the floor, she hid the storm that was building behind her eyes. It was a storm of cold, calculated fury. This was not over. It had just begun. To understand the unnerving calm of Camille Brooks, you had to understand that she was not a housekeeper at all. She was a queen in disguise, walking among her own people to see their true hearts. Camille Brooks was the secret owner of Sterling Crest and the vast, multi-billion-dollar corporation that funded it. She was a self-made titan of industry, a woman who had clawed her way up from the depths of the foster care system with nothing but a brilliant mind and an unbreakable will. She had built an empire from scratch, a fortress of finance and innovation, and she had done it all in the shadows, preferring anonymity to the glaring spotlight of public life. This mansion wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary she had built for the most important person in her world, Olivia. Years ago, after she had already amassed a fortune that could buy and sell small countries, Camille had done the one thing she had always dreamed of. She adopted a child. Olivia was not Richard and Vicky's daughter. She was Camille's. She had found Olivia in an underfunded orphanage, a tiny, fragile baby with a rare medical condition that required constant, vigilant care. Camille had poured her resources into giving Olivia the best life imaginable, the best doctors, the best nurses, and a home that was a veritable fortress of safety and love. She had hired Richard Hale, a competent if somewhat spineless executive, to be the public face of her company and the manager of her estate. She gave him a generous salary, a beautiful home, and one simple directive: to run the household smoothly and ensure Olivia's safety above all else. Marrying the image-obsessed Vicky had been Richard's idea, a move to create the perfect corporate family portrait. Camille had allowed it, believing a stable two-parent household, even a constructed one, would be good for Olivia's development. But recently, whispers had reached Camille's ears through her trusted channels. Quiet rumors of financial misconduct, of small but significant sums of money being funneled from household accounts into personal offshore ventures, and all the whispers had one name attached to them: Vicky Hale. Camille was not a woman who tolerated betrayal. Loyalty was the currency she valued above all others. So, she had decided to investigate in person. She created the identity of a new housekeeper, a quiet, unassuming woman who could move through the house unseen and unheard. She wanted to observe the Hales up close. She wanted to see how they treated the staff, the people who were paid to be powerless. She wanted to see if the rot of greed had spread to how they treated human beings. Her calm during Vicky's tirade was not weakness. It was the controlled stillness of a predator. Every insult, every shove, every sneering word was not just an attack on a housekeeper. It was an attack on the owner of the house, the mother of the child, and the woman who held Vicky's entire world in the palm of her hand. Vicky just didn't know it yet. Later that night, the mansion had settled back into its usual state of hushed quiet. The drama of the morning had been swept under the rug, spoken of only in whispers in the staff quarters. Camille was in the main pantry, a vast, climate-controlled room lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves of polished silverware. She was methodically polishing a set of antique silver spoons, her hands moving with the same steady rhythm she used for everything. The repetitive motion helped her think, helped her channel the cold fire of her anger into a sharp, focused plan. The door creaked open, and a young woman in a junior maid's uniform slipped inside. It was Maya Trent. She was shy, with wide, nervous eyes that always seemed to be looking for the quickest exit. She stood by the door, wringing her hands, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen everything that morning. She had seen Vicky's cruelty, and she had seen Camille's quiet dignity. It had stirred something in her, a deep sense of injustice that was at war with her ingrained fear of authority. She had spent the entire day wrestling with herself, her conscience screaming at her to do something, to say something. Finally, she had gathered every ounce of her courage and sought out the new housekeeper. "Excuse me," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Camille didn't look up from her polishing, but her movements paused for a fraction of a second. "Yes, Maya," she said, her voice gentle. Maya was startled that the new housekeeper knew her name. I saw what happened this morning," she stammered, her words rushing out in a nervous torrent. "In the hall, with Mrs. Hale and the baby. It wasn't right. What she said to you, what she did, it wasn't right." Camille finally stopped polishing. She placed the spoon carefully on the velvet cloth beside her and turned to look at the young maid. She saw the fear in Maya's eyes, but she also saw a flicker of something else, a spark of integrity. "Thank you for saying that, Maya," Camille said, her voice soft and encouraging. "It takes courage to speak up." Maya looked down at her shoes, a blush creeping up her neck. I felt like someone should say something." Camille gave her a small, knowing smile. "The truth has a way of coming out, Maya," she said, her words carrying a weight that the young maid couldn't quite decipher. "What matters is that you hold on to what you know to be right. Don't let anyone, no matter how powerful they seem, make you doubt your own moral compass." Maya looked up, meeting Camille's gaze. For the first time she felt that strange sense of power, emanating from the housekeeper, the same feeling Vicky had recoiled from. She realized, with a sudden jolt of certainty, that this woman was not what she seemed. There was a depth to Camille, a hidden strength that was far more powerful than Vicky's loud, flashy dominance. A seed of alliance had been planted in the quiet pantry, a silent pact between the hidden queen and the shy maid who chose to see the truth. The very next afternoon, Maya was dusting the furniture in the West Wing sunroom, a space Vicky often used for her personal calls. As she worked, she heard Vicky's voice, sharp and self-satisfied, drifting from the room. Vicky was on speakerphone, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "You should have seen it, Cynthia," Vicky crowed to one of her wealthy friends. "I put her right in her place. That black cleaning lady actually thought she could touch Olivia." Maya froze behind a large potted palm, her heart beginning to pound. Vicky let out that same ugly laugh from the day before. Richard, of course, was a total wet blanket about it, going on about some medical nonsense. But I made it clear, people like that need to know their place. They are here to serve us, not to have opinions or to get familiar. Maya's stomach churned. The casual cruelty, the dismissive racism, it made her feel sick. Then Vicky's voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone. "Honestly, I think she's a bit slow. She just stood there in the dirty water like a cow. I'm going to make sure Richard fires her by the end of the week." We can't have that kind of element in the house. Listening to the one-sided conversation, Maya felt her fear being burned away by a hot, rising anger. This was wrong. Utterly and completely wrong. On pure instinct, she pulled her phone from her apron pocket. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely press the right button, but she managed to start a voice recording. She held the phone behind the planter, capturing Vicky's smug, poisonous words as they filled the sunroom. She caught the last 30 seconds of the call, a damning monologue of arrogance and prejudice. Heart pounding like a drum against her ribs, She slipped away before Vicky could finish her call. For the rest of the day, the recording felt like a hot coal in her pocket. What should she do with it? Giving it to Richard felt useless. He had already shown he was too weak to stand up to his wife. Going to the head of staff was a risk. They might just cover for Vicky to keep the peace. Then she remembered Camille's words from the night before. Hold on to what you know to be right. She knew what she had to do. That evening, she found Camille again. This time, organizing linens in a large closet. Maya didn't say a word. She simply walked up to Camille, her face pale but determined, and held out her phone. Camille looked from the phone to Maya's terrified, resolute eyes. She understood immediately. She took the phone from Maya's trembling hand. The transfer was a small, silent act, but it was charged with immense power. It was an act of rebellion, a choice of loyalty, a profound gesture of courage from the lowest person in the household hierarchy against its self-proclaimed queen. Camille gave Maya a single slow nod. It was all the thanks Maya needed. In that moment, Maya Trent was no longer just a maid. She was a co-conspirator in the pursuit of justice. Vicky Hale, meanwhile, felt completely untouchable. The incident in the hall, in her mind, had only solidified her position as the true mistress of the mansion. She floated through the next day on a cloud of smug satisfaction, taking every opportunity to exercise her perceived power. She found a fingerprint on a crystal glass, and berated the head butler for 10 minutes in front of his junior staff, questioning his competence and threatening to dock his pay. She sent back her lunch 3 times, complaining that the salad greens were not vibrant enough. Richard watched her behavior with a growing sense of unease. Vicky, maybe you should tone it down, he suggested tentatively over dinner. The staff is on edge, Vicky had scoffed, waving her fork dismissively. Let them be on edge. It will keep them sharp. Besides, I'm about to get rid of the problem. I told you, Richard, I want that housekeeper Camille gone. I expect her dismissal paperwork on my desk by morning. Richard had just sighed and looked down at his plate, defeated. Vicky's reign of petty tyranny continued. She saw Maya walking down a corridor, and stopped her, her eyes narrowing. I heard you talking in the pantry the other night, she said, her voice a low threat. With the new maid, if I find out you're gossiping, I'll have you kicked out of here so fast your head will spin. Do you understand me? Maya just nodded, her heart hammering, but she held Vicky's gaze, her newfound courage a small flickering flame. Vicky, annoyed by the lack of trembling fear, swept past her. She was the queen of a glass castle, so blinded by her own reflection that she couldn't see the cracks forming in the foundation all around her. She was a classic tyrant, so obsessed with demonstrating her power over the small and the weak that she was completely oblivious to the real, immense power that was silently watching, waiting, and preparing to bring the entire castle crashing down. That night, in her small Spartan staff quarters, Camille sat on the edge of her simple bed. The room was a world away from the opulence of the rest of the mansion. It had a single bed, a small wooden dresser, and one barred window. It was the room of a servant, but the woman in the room was anything but. She reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a sleek black satellite phone, a piece of technology so advanced and secure it was virtually untraceable. She turned it on, the screen glowing to life, and made a single call. A man's voice answered on the first ring, crisp and professional. Yes, Miss Brooks. It was Arthur Vance, her chief legal counsel, and one of the only people on earth who knew her true identity. Arthur, Camille said, and her voice was no longer the soft, gentle tone of the housekeeper. It was the voice of a CEO, a commander. It was a voice of ice and steel. Prepare the board. I want an emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock sharp, in the main conference room at the estate. Of course, Miss Brooks, the lawyer replied, without a hint of surprise. Is there a specific agenda? The agenda is staff conduct, Camille stated, and a full financial review of the household accounts for the last 12 months. I want the final report on my desk when I arrive, the one we discussed. It will be there, Arthur confirmed. Excellent, Camille said. And Arthur? Have the head of security present as well. There was a brief pause on the other end. Understood, Miss Brooks, the lawyer said, his voice now tinged with a note of gravity. Camille ended the call without another word. She placed the secure phone back in her bag, and then picked up a small framed photograph from her nightstand. It was a picture of a smiling baby Olivia, her eyes bright and full of life. Camille traced the outline of her daughter's face with her finger. "No one," she whispered to the photograph, her voice a low, fierce promise. "No one threatens my daughter's future." The next morning, the air in the mansion was thick with an unspoken tension. At precisely 9:30, a summons was delivered to Vicky Hale. A formally dressed assistant, someone Vicky had never seen before, knocked on the door of her suite and handed her a crisp white envelope. "Mrs. Hale," the assistant said, his face impassive. "You and Mr. Hale are requested at a meeting in the main boardroom at 10 o'clock to discuss a matter of staff conduct." Vicky barely glanced at him. She took the envelope and rolled her eyes. "Fine," she snapped, already closing the door in his face. She turned to Richard, who was nervously straightening his tie. "See," she said, with a triumphant smile. "They're finally taking me seriously. This is it. We're going to go in there, and I'm going to have that cleaning lady fired. It's about time." Richard didn't look so sure. "Vicky, the board's legal counsel is flying in for this, and the security chief will be there. It seems a bit excessive for firing a single housekeeper." Vicky waved his concerns away with a flick of her wrist. "Don't be so dramatic, Richard. They're just being thorough because it involves the baby. It's all procedure. Now, come on, I want to get this over with." She dragged him along, her confidence a brilliant, blinding cloak. She walked into the boardroom with her head held high, expecting to see a few senior staff members and perhaps a human resources manager. Instead, she walked into a room that felt like a war council. The long, polished mahogany table was filled with stern-faced men and women in expensive suits. These were not household managers. These were the top advisors of Camille's vast empire. The powerful, unseen figures who pulled the strings of global finance. At one end of the room stood the imposing figure of the security chief, his arms crossed over his chest, and sitting nervously near the door, clutching her phone like a lifeline, was Maya Trent, the junior maid. Vicky stopped short, her confident stride faltering. "What is all this?" she whispered to Richard. "Who are these people?" Richard's face had gone pale. He recognized some of them from the company's annual reports. These were the true power players, the inner circle. A cold dread began to seep into his bones. The tension in the room was electric, a thick, humming silence that vibrated with anticipation. Everyone was waiting. Vicky and Richard stood awkwardly near the entrance, suddenly feeling like intruders in their own home. The heavy, ornate clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into an eternity. And then, at precisely 10 o'clock, the boardroom doors swung open. A figure entered the room, and for a moment, no one seemed to breathe. It was Camille Brooks. But it was not the Camille they knew. Gone was the plain, grey housekeeper's uniform, the worn-out shoes, the submissive posture. In her place stood a woman of breathtaking power and elegance. She wore a tailored designer suit of deep charcoal grey that fit her like a second skin. Her hair was swept up in a sophisticated style, and her walk was not the shuffling gait of a servant, but the confident, measured stride of a commander. She moved with an aura of absolute authority, her presence instantly dominating the room. The entire boardroom went silent. Jaws literally dropped. The stony-faced board members all rose to their feet in a sign of deep respect. Vicky stared, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. This was not possible. This was the maid, the woman she had screamed at, the woman she had shoved, the woman she had forced to clean up dirty water. Richard Hale's face turned the color of ash. A wave of nausea washed over him as the horrifying truth began to dawn on him. He felt the floor drop out from beneath him. This woman, this quiet, unassuming housekeeper, was someone else entirely. Someone far, far more important. Maya Trent, watching from her chair near the door, was equally stunned. She stared at Camille, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. The hidden strength she had sensed in Camille was now on full display, a blinding light of power. Camille didn't look at Vicky or Richard. She walked calmly to the head of the long table, the seat of ultimate authority, and took her place. The board members sat down in unison. Camille surveyed the room, her gaze sweeping over the powerful advisors, the nervous maid, the terrified CEO, and finally, settling on the woman who was still standing, frozen in disbelief. Camille's eyes were cold and hard as diamonds. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice the same icy, controlled tone she had used on the phone with her lawyer. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." She paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then she turned her head slowly, her gaze locking onto Vicky. "I am Camille Brooks," she announced, her voice clear and ringing with absolute power. "I own this house. I own the company that pays your husband's salary. And Olivia," she added, her voice dropping slightly, becoming fiercely protective, "is my daughter." She let that statement hang in the air for a moment, a devastating bombshell. Then, her eyes still fixed on Vicky's crumbling face, she delivered the final fatal blow. "And you," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet, "are done here." The words hung in the air, final and absolute. Vicky's face, which had been a mask of shock, began to crumble. You can't," she stammered, the words catching in her throat. "This is a joke." "Richard, tell them this is a joke." Richard remained silent, his face a ghastly shade of grey. He couldn't speak, he could barely breathe. Camille ignored Vicky's sputtering protests. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Maya. Trembling, Maya stood up and connected her phone to the room's advanced audio system. A moment later, Vicky's own voice filled the silent boardroom, amplified and chillingly clear. "You should have seen it, Cynthia. I put her right in her place. That black cleaning lady actually thought she could touch Olivia. People like that need to know their place. I think she's a bit slow. I'm going to make sure Richard fires her by the end of the week." The recording played out in its entirety, each smug, cruel word echoing off the polished mahogany and marble. The faces of the board members, which had been stern, now turned to ice. They looked at Vicky with open contempt. When the recording finished, a suffocating silence descended once more. Camille let the silence stretch, letting Vicky drown in her own poison. "That element, as you called her," Camille said, her voice dangerously calm, "saved my daughter's life, while you, the person entrusted with her care, were only concerned with your own fragile ego and putting someone in what you perceive to be their place." Camille gestured to a thick file that her lawyer, Arthur Vance, had placed in front of her. "This is a full financial report of the household. It details, among other things, a series of unauthorized transfers from the estate accounts to a private, offshore account registered in your maiden name. It seems your sense of entitlement extends beyond the staff and into my bank accounts." Vicky's face went from pale to ghostly white. She looked at Richard, her eyes pleading for help, for him to deny it, to say something, but Richard just stared at the table. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew, he had suspected, but he had been too weak to confront her. Camille's gaze was relentless. "Effective immediately. All of your credit lines are frozen. Your access to all estate properties is revoked. The company car will be retrieved this afternoon. You will be escorted to your suite to pack a single bag of your personal belongings. The rest of your things will be shipped to a destination of your choosing." Each sentence was a hammer blow, dismantling Vicky's entire world piece by piece. "You have no position here," Camille continued, her voice devoid of any emotion. "You have no power here. Your influence in this house, and in my life, ends today." She paused, then delivered the final verdict with a chilling finality. "Vicky Hale, you are fired." The word "fired" echoed in the silent room, not loud, but devastating. It was the end of everything for Vicky. The carefully constructed life, the status, the wealth, the power, it all evaporated in that single moment. Her face, her beautiful, arrogant face, crumpled like a piece of paper. The facade of the powerful wife shattered, revealing the small, petty, and now pathetic person underneath. A strangled sob escaped her lips. From the doorway, where a small crowd of staff had gathered to watch the proceedings, there was a collective, audible gasp. Some stared in speechless shock. Others, who had borne the brunt of Vicky's cruelty for years, exchanged small, triumphant glances. It was a quiet, bloodless coup, but a coup nonetheless. The tyrant had fallen. In the aftermath of the verdict, the atmosphere in the room slowly began to shift. The crushing tension gave way to a new, uncertain order. Camille Brooks turned her attention away from the now sobbing Vicky, dismissing her as if she were a minor inconvenience that had already been dealt with. Her gaze softened as it landed on Maya Trent, who was still standing by her chair, looking overwhelmed. "Maya," Camille said, and her voice was warm again, full of genuine gratitude. "Please come here." Maya hesitated, then walked nervously to the head of the table. Camille stood up and placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. She spoke loudly enough for everyone in the room, and all the staff gathered at the door to hear clearly. "Yesterday, Maya Trent showed more courage and integrity than anyone in a position of power in this household," Camille announced. "She refused to be silent in the face of injustice. She stood up for what was right, even at great personal risk. She looked directly to the head butler and the other senior staff. That is the kind of character I value. That is the kind of person I want leading my team." She then looked back at Maya, a warm smile on her face. "Effective immediately, I am promoting Maya Trent to the position of head of household staff. She will report directly to me. She will be in charge of all domestic operations, and she will have my full support." A wave of murmurs and gasps went through the assembled staff. Maya stared at Camille, her mouth agape. Head of household staff. It was the most senior position, a role of immense trust and responsibility. "But I'm just a junior maid," Maya whispered, her mind reeling. "You are a leader," Camille corrected her gently but firmly. "You just didn't know it yet." Then, Camille addressed the entire room, her voice filled with a passion and clarity that held everyone captive. She finally revealed the full truth. "Olivia is my daughter," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I adopted her when she was a baby. I built this company, this house, this entire life for her, to protect her. I came here, undercover, because I needed to see for myself if this was truly a safe and nurturing home for her. I needed to see if the people I entrusted with her care were worthy of that trust." Her eyes swept over the staff, Richard, and the board members. Some, I have learned, were not. Richard Hale finally looked up, his face etched with shame and regret. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady. "Miss Brooks, Camille," he began, his voice hoarse. "I am so sorry. I failed you. I failed Olivia. I was weak, and I was blinded by everything. There is no excuse." Camille looked at him, her expression unreadable for a long moment. "No, Richard," she said quietly. "There is no excuse. You let cruelty fester under your roof, because you were afraid to confront it." She paused. "You will remain in your position as CEO, for now, but things will be different. There will be new rules." She looked around the room, her gaze firm and unwavering. "And the first rule is this. Never again will status be an excuse for cruelty in this house. Never again will a person's worth be judged by the uniform they wear or the job they do. Everyone here will be treated with dignity and respect. Is that understood?" A chorus of "Yes, Miss Brooks" filled the room. A new era had begun. As the weeks turned into months, a profound change settled over the Sterling Crest mansion. The cold, sterile silence of the past was replaced by a new warmth, a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect. The fear that had once permeated the staff quarters was gone, replaced by loyalty. Camille Brooks, no longer in disguise, ruled not with an iron fist, but with a compassionate heart and a clear, unwavering sense of justice. She was a constant presence, not as a distant, unapproachable billionaire, but as the lady of the house, the mother of the child, and the mentor to her staff. Maya Trent, blossoming in her new role, proved to be a natural leader, managing the household with a fairness and efficiency that earned her the deep respect of her colleagues. She and Camille formed a close bond, a partnership built on a shared belief in doing what was right. Richard Hale, humbled and ashamed, worked diligently to earn back Camille's trust, slowly transforming from a weak-willed manager into a more conscientious leader. The story closes on a bright, sunny afternoon. Camille is sitting on a blanket in the mansion's sprawling garden, bouncing a giggling Olivia on her lap. The baby is healthy and happy, her laughter echoing in the warm air. Maya walks over and sits beside them, no longer a shy, nervous maid, but a confident young woman, a true friend. They watch Olivia chase a butterfly across the lawn, and a genuine, peaceful smile graces Camille's face. The mansion behind them no longer looks like a cold monument to wealth, but a real home, filled with light and life. True power isn't what you wear or the title you hold. It isn't found in a loud voice or a cruel word. True power is quiet. It's found in character, in courage, and in the profound strength it takes to protect those who are seen as having none. True power isn't what you wear, it's how you protect those without it. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.